Let's study 9th standard ICSE Biology, Chapter 8, 5 Kingdom Classification.
So far, Earth seems to be the only planet which has life. We haven't discovered any alien life yet. No, you can't argue that your weird teacher is an alien. On Earth, we have millions of species of plants, animals, microorganisms. We even have things which we are not sure whether they are living or not. What are they? Yes, viruses. How did life originate? That's a very complex theory. But after studying all the species, we have understood how to classify them, making it easy to study their characteristics. The 5 kingdom classification is an older version, which is relevant for school level understanding. But first, let's understand what is a species. A species is an organism of a particular kind whose members can interbreed among themselves to produce fertile young ones. So 2 keywords here are interbreed and fertile. For example, all the human beings on this planet belong to the same species called Homo sapiens. That's because we can interbreed, we can reproduce, we can have a couple in which one person is an African, a black African, and the other person is a Caucasian, a European, a white person. They can have babies, fertile, healthy babies. We are all humans. We had a common ancestor directly. So, what about donkey and a horse? Why do we say they are from different species? They can reproduce, yes, and their baby is called a mule, which will have characteristics of both. However, mule is infertile, it is sterile, it cannot reproduce further. That's why we say that donkey and horse don't belong to the same species. On the other hand, if we have a black colored horse from Asia who's able to reproduce with, let's say, a brown colored horse from Australia and give fertile offsprings, that means that they belong to the same species. Crossbreeds are quite common. We can have a zebra crossed with a donkey to give you a zenki. We can have a tiger and a lion giving you tigan, and a goat and a sheep giving you jeep or geep. And tomato is of course potato plus tomato, but they are not different or new species. They are just artificially created by us, which cannot reproduce further. Now there are some categories which are higher than species. For example, we have a jungle crow and we have a house crow. Now they are different species. That means they cannot reproduce or crossbreed very easily. However, they have many common characteristics. They're very close relatives of each other. You can say cousins. That's why they're called crows, both of them. Hence, they belong to a same category called genus. Then the higher category is family. For example, the lion and the tiger, they are different species and they belong to the same genus, which is called Panthera. Now, there is another genus called Felis, which includes domestic cat. Now, you may imagine that a cat and a tiger are completely different, but they have many common characteristics. So they belong to the same family. Next, higher order is the order, a group of related families. So we have the cat family and we have the dog family. And even these two families have a lot in common because you can say that they are carnivores. So they are in a category called order. Whatever is cancelled, you don't have to learn, you just have to learn the definitions. But it's good to understand them with the help of examples. The next higher category is called class. So all the carnivores or the herbivores together form a class called Mammalia, all the mammals, that is. More about it later. The next higher level is phylum. It is the largest division in classification of plants and animals. For example, there is a phylum called Chordata. We will study all the phyla of animals in detail in this chapter, and particularly we will study Mammalia in detail because we belong to this phylum called Chordata and this class called Mammalia. We won't study the plant kingdom in detail simply because that's for the plants to study. And the largest division of all living beings on earth is the kingdom. Many related phyla together is called a kingdom. So that should be the starting point now. The largest classification, largest division rather, will be the 5 kingdoms. It's best to study this with the help of a flowchart. So you can see the 5 kingdoms here. In the olden days, there were only plants and animals, but then we realized that there are some microorganisms which are neither plants nor animals. So organisms are first of all classified as prokaryotes, that is those who don't have an organized nucleus, unicellular of course. They are called monera. Example, bacteria, cyanobacteria, that is blue-green algae, etc. And all the advanced cells which have an organized nucleus, they are called eukaryotes. Now, such organisms can be either unicellular or multicellular. If they are unicellular, they are called Protista. Example, amoeba, euglena, etc. And if they are multicellular, then they may have cell wall or they may not have cell wall. If they have a cell wall, then either they can do photosynthesis or they can't. If they can't do, then they are fungi, like mushroom, yeast, etc. By the way, yeast is unicellular, but there are exceptions in everything. If they can do photosynthesis, then they are Plantae. Now, there are some plants which don't do photosynthesis, surprisingly, again an exception. What if multicellular organisms don't have a cell wall? Then they are belonging to a kingdom called Animalia. So these are the 5 kingdoms, and now you know the logic behind it. This flowchart is so useful. By just looking at it, I can understand so many characteristics of, let's say, plants. I can say all plants do photosynthesis, all plants cells have cell wall, all plants are multicellular, all plants are eukaryotes, that is they have an organized nucleus. Now let's study these kingdoms in detail. Monera, Protista, I've already explained. Now, Protista may be autotrophic, that is photosynthetic. Example, Chlamydomonas. And no, we can't call them plants still. And they can be heterotrophic. For example, Euglena, Amoeba, Paramecium. Fungi examples. Toad stool, because it looks like the stool of a toad. Bread mold, penicillium, and yeast. No, I just made it up. I don't know why it's called toad stool. You can Google it. Penicillin was very useful. It helped us to create the first antibiotic, penicillin. Students, in this chapter, if you ask me what is the most important thing, I would say diagrams. In exams, they would give you diagrams and they would ask you to identify the phylum or the species and even write characteristics about it and give other examples of that same phylum. So if you can't identify the diagram, then the whole question will go wrong. And they won't give the exact diagram of the textbook. They may give diagrams which are a little different from some other book or source. So it's very important that we understand all the characteristics and parts of the body of the organism properly. You can make flashcards or your own notes to remember all these diagrams with their characteristics and the names and the examples. Now, Plantae. Plantae are photosynthetic, so they are autotrophic. They make their own food. Yeah, even if you can make your own food, that doesn't mean you're autotrophic, because the raw materials you are getting are from plants. If you're green and you can stand in the sunlight to create your own food, then I will allow you to call yourself autotrophic. Now, plants can be divided into Thalophyta, Bryophyta, Pteridophyta, and Gymnosperms and Angiosperms. There is a flowchart for this as well, but we are not going to study this in detail. We'll just study these terms superficially. Thalophyta example is algae, Chlamydomonas, etc. They have chlorophyll, but they don't have roots, stems, and leaves. They're aquatic mostly. Next, Bryophyta. That's a little more advanced. And in this classification, you will always notice that the next phylum always is a bit more advanced. The next level is always more advanced, more complex. It's as if the higher levels have evolved from the lower levels. Bryophyta, example, are mosses and liverworts. They have false roots called rhizoids. They're also autotrophic, of course. Pteridophyta, it includes ferns. They reproduce with the help of spores on their underside. They are non-flowering plants. And then we have gymnosperms, cycas and pine, fir, etc. All the coniferous trees. They reproduce with the help of seeds. So fertilization happens, sexual reproduction happens in them. But the seeds are naked. They are not enclosed in any fruits. They have male and female flower-like structures which don't exactly look like a flower, which don't have the usual petals, etc. They are just structures which look like a flower. Angiosperms are the flowering plants, and they are the usual plants which we see in our day-to-day life. They have roots, stems, and leaves. They have fruits. They can be monocots or dicots. Monocots have seeds which have a single cotyledon in their seed. Dicots have seeds which have two cotyledons in their seed. Monocots have parallel venation, that is, in their leaves, the veins are parallel. And dicots have leaves whose veins are reticulate. Monocots have a fibrous root system, that is, the root does not have any primary root, it just has fibers. And the dicots have a taproot system, that is, they have a primary root, then they have a secondary root, they have tertiary roots, and so on. And if you remember, monocots have stomata on both surfaces of the leaves, whereas dicots have stomata mostly on the underside of the leaf. You'll study more about it in 10th standard. Now we come to the main topic of this chapter, the Animalia. They are multicellular, of course, heterotrophic. Now, if you notice, any species name always has a binomial nomenclature because it always has a genus name as well as a species name. Genus has a capital letter, species doesn't, and usually we write it in italics, or you can underline them. That's the scientific way of writing it, and of course there should be a space in between. Now this table tells us the difference between plants and animals. We just have to learn the boxed keywords: chlorophyll, no chlorophyll. They are fixed, they move about freely, they do photosynthesis, they don't. The cells have cell wall, the cells don't have cell wall. They have large vacuoles, they don't. Their organ systems are very simple, just root system and shoot system, whereas we have various organ systems, at least the higher animals. They can grow indefinitely throughout their life. We grow only till a certain age, then we stop growing. Vertically, horizontally, of course, we can grow. Their growth is confined to the tips of the roots and shoot and the circumference of the stem, of course. Our growth is uniform, all parts grow equally, except our eyes. Eyes don't grow. Their bodies are of spreading type, whereas our bodies are very compact. They respond very slowly to external stimulus. We respond quickly because we have a nervous system and they don't. Now these are the phyla. 9 phyla which you have to learn. Learn the spellings perfectly. Beautiful names, isn't it? Let's learn these the characteristics of each phyla now. First of all, Porifera. The diagrams, learn them. Cyclin and bath sponge. It is called a bath sponge because it looks like a bath sponge. No, I'm not kidding. I never do. They have many pores or ostia for the entry of water. Water goes inside, water has nutrients and food which is used by them, and the water exits from here, called the osculum. They are the simplest multicellular animals. Yeah, they are animals. And they have these spicules, thorny, maybe for their protection. Learn all the examples because they can ask that in the exam. They can be a freshwater or seawater as their habitat. Next phylum, the second one, which is a little more advanced, is Cnidaria or Coelenterata. Hydra, jellyfish, sea anemone, corals. What is common in all of them? You can see that they have like a radial symmetry, isn't it? If you draw a diameter anywhere, they will be symmetrical. All of them have tentacles. Yes, jellyfish also has tentacles. No, octopus is not a part of this. That's a different phylum altogether. Most of them have, especially the corals, have a hard skeleton on the outside made up of calcium carbonate. They don't have bones, by the way. They don't have a brain either. Jellyfish has been existing on Earth for 300 million years without a brain. So there's hope for you also. The next phylum is Platy Helmets. The next 3 phyla, in fact, are worms. Platy Helmets are flatworms, Nematoda are roundworms, and my favorite, Annelida, are segmented worms. Flatworms, as the name suggests, are flat, as you can see. Tapeworms, they may live in your gut, sucking all the nutrition you eat. No matter how much you eat, you will always be thin because of them taking all the nutrition. Don't worry, it's not very common at all. They have only one opening. The mouth itself serves as the anus. Means they eat from that opening and they ingest the waste from that same opening. The planaria is quite interesting because it does regeneration. If you cut it into pieces, each piece will grow into a new planaria. It's almost like they're immortal. Of course, if you crush them, then they will die. They are mostly parasites. That is, they live on or inside the animals. But a few are free as well. Nematoda are roundworms, so they are round. They're not flat like their counterparts here. They have a different anus and mouth. So you can see that they are more advanced. But they are unsegmented. Earthworm is segmented, it has segments, but they are not segmented. Examples are eelworm, ascaris, hookworm. Again, some are parasites and some are not. And finally, the segmented worms. Look at Nereis, how beautiful this insect is. And the earthworm, it has a separate anus and mouth, of course. It has a reproductive organ called clitellum. The leech is parasitic. It has a sucker which can suck the blood from your skin. You won't even realize it for a long time. What is this beauty? Nereis. Earthworm is called farmer's best friend because as it passes through the soil, it loosens it up, aerates it. Its excreta makes the soil fertile. In fact, compost is made with the help of earthworm called vermicompost. There's a table to understand the difference between them. Unsegmented and cylindrical and segmented. Body cavity is absent. Cavity means the hollow space inside a body. We have an alimentary canal. That's a cavity, right? Here a false body cavity is present, means not fully developed. And here we have true body cavity, means this is the most developed out of the three phyla. It has only one mouth and anus, the same one. This has a separate mouth and anus. And this too also has separate mouth and anus. Next we have the arthropoda, jointed legged animals. It has all the insects. It is the largest animal kingdom with largest number of species. So many insects. Crayfish, crabs, millipedes, centipedes, insects, scorpions. Well, not just insects. It has many other categories. It has the crustaceans, the myriapods, which have many legs. Oh, it's beautiful. Wouldn't you like this on your hand, centipede? Insects and even arachnids. Some people have arachnophobia. They're scared of spiders and scorpions. Yeah, different people have different phobia. All of you are suffering from one phobia. It's called homework phobia. Anyway, this is cancelled. We just have to know that all the arthropods have an exoskeleton called chitin, which is very interesting because this chitin can even block nuclear radiations. Imagine if there is a nuclear holocaust and nuclear war, all the humans will become extinct, but cockroaches will survive because they have chitin. They even cast off their exoskeleton and regrow it, which is called molting. Molting happens in other categories also. For example, snakes also molt their skin. You may have seen the outer skin is just removed by them and there is a new skin underneath it. Even we continuously grow our skin, although it's not visible. Or maybe it is if you have a lot of dandruff. This tells us the different types of symmetry. We have bilateral symmetry, that is LHS is almost same as RHS, even here bilateral symmetry. This is radial symmetry, no matter which axis you take, it's symmetrical. Amoeba is asymmetrical, and so is my handwriting. Next phylum is Mollusca. Learn all the examples. Devilfish is not a fish, it's octopus. Cuttlefish is not a fish, it's sepia. These are all mollusks. Slug is also a mollusk. All of them have a muscular foot for locomotion, and all of them have a calcareous shell to protect them. Next, Echinodermata, spiny skinned animals. Starfish, sea urchin, sea cucumber, and brittle star. This is not a fish, by the way. What's common in all of them? They're all radially symmetrical. So if you draw an axis here, they look the same, LHS and RHS. And all of them have a tube feet. Have you ever seen a starfish climbing on the glass walls of their vessel in which they are in an aquarium? They have tube feet, that is they can stick and climb with the help of their tube feet. Even octopus has it, of course. And all of them have a spiny surface. Their mouth is in the center, by the way. And then the most important Phylum Codata. I'm saying important because we belong to that. The Phylum Codata is called so because all the organisms possess a notochord or a vertebral column. So the best way to start learning this is via the flowchart here. The animal kingdom flowchart. So animal kingdom can be invertebrates or vertebrates. We belong to the vertebrates. They have a notochord, which is like an undeveloped vertebral column, whereas all the other animals don't have it. In vertebrates, also called chordata, heart is on the ventral side, that is the front side. And if they have a heart, many of them don't have a heart, but if they have a heart, it will be on the dorsal side, the back side. In chordata, hemoglobin is contained in the RBCs, whereas they don't. They have the hemoglobin dissolved in the blood itself. They don't have RBCs. Now these invertebrates can either be porifera, which are the simplest animals. They can be nidaria, or they can have proper organ systems, more complex. In that case, either they have no true body cavity or they have a body cavity present. If they have no true body cavity, they can either be Platy Helmets or nematoda, which are the worms we just studied, And if they have a body cavity, then they can be a worm called Annelida, or they can be Arthropoda, Mollusca, Echinodermata, and we have studied all of their characteristics. Remember, Annelida have excretory organ called nephridia. Now this chordata is further classified into 5 classes: amphibians, mammals, birds, fishes, reptiles. But the correct order of them will be like this, simplest to the most complex. We are not studying the classes of the remaining 8 phyla, fortunately, but you can study them in higher standards if you're interested. Let's study the 5 classes of phylum number 9, Chordata, also called the vertebrate class. Class 1, the Pisces. Let's start off with the flow chart to understand the difference between them. So, the Pisces, the Amphibia, and the Reptilia are cold-blooded. These 3 are cold-blooded, which means that they don't produce their body heat. On the other hand, the AVs and the Mammalia are warm-blooded. They produce their body heat. Pisces obviously are aquatic. They have a 2-chambered heart. Amphibia have a 3-chambered heart, 3-chambered heart, 4-chambered heart, 4-chambered heart. We have 2 auricles and 2 ventricles. Fertilization is external. That is, the male gamete and the female gamete fertilize outside the body. Even here it's external. And then here it changes. AVs and Mammalia have internal fertilization. They have fins. They are able to live on land as well as in water. So they have gills as well as they can breathe through skin and lungs. They have 2 pairs of limbs. Reptilia, they have leathery eggs, very hard eggs. They have lungs for breathing. Although they may be good swimmers, but they have to stay on land for breathing. They have dry, scaly skin. The AVs, they also have lungs for breathing. They lay calcareous eggs, so they are oviparous. And the forelimbs have become wings, although sometimes the wings are of no use, for example, the penguins and the ostrich. Mammalia, they have hairy skin, they have lungs, 2 pairs of limbs. They give birth to young ones, so they are viviparous. Although there are a couple of exceptions, which we shall study. And the most defining characteristic is that the females have mammary glands, which secrete milk. Mammary glands, that's why they're called Mammalia. They have external ears called pinnae. Birds also have ears, but they don't have a pinnae, the external ear. They just have a hole. That's why they can hear sound. Fish can be further classified as cartilaginous or bony fish, depending on what is the skeleton made up of. So we need to learn the examples of both. Another difference between the cartilaginous and bony fish is that the cartilaginous fish don't have a gill cover, whereas the bony fishes have a gill cover. And as I said that they are cold-blooded, that is poikilothermal. That is, the body temperature fluctuates as the temperature of the environment changes. We are warm-blooded, so if the external temperature decreases, yet our body temperature will remain at 37 degrees Celsius. That is why we produce our own heat. But they don't. That is why these animals may not be active in very cold weather. They may even undergo hibernation. Next, amphibia. They can live on both land and water. They have an eardrum called tympanum, which is on the surface of the skin. They don't have a pinna, that is external ear. They can have 5-fingered limbs, that is pentadactyl. And 3-chambered heart, of course. Reptile, we've studied its characteristics. It's cold-blooded as well. AVs, they have feathers. It seems that the birds have evolved from reptiles. That's why they are more advanced, because they are warm-blooded. They are homeothermal. They maintain their own temperature. They have to produce a lot of heat. That is why they are active even in winter season. They have a eardrum in a pit. They don't have pinnae. Finally, Mammalia. We are viviparous, but there are some mammals which lay eggs. For example, the anteater or the duck-billed platypus. All of them have mammary glands, the females. And we have a 4-chambered heart. Also, we have the males have external testes. The females have ovaries which are inside the body, which produces female gametes. But in males, the testes which produces male gametes are hanging outside the body, external, because the sperms cannot survive in 37 degrees Celsius. They need to be a little cooler outside the body, say 35 degrees Celsius. We'll study the reproductive organs in detail in 10th standard. Mammals are the most intelligent. They have the biggest brains, like dolphins, humans, etc. There may be a few exceptions, so you don't worry about that.
Hi students, this is AJ sir. If you like this video, press the like button. If you would like to enroll for my online test series or online lectures, email me or message me on Instagram. Check the description for more information.